The following is a production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. Kick off your work boots and pull up a boulder. It's time for Man Cave, discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. Grab your favorite beverage, pick out a comfy spot around the campfire, and enjoy today's conversation with our two favorite cavemen, Pat King and Brian Howe.
Hi, welcome to Pat King's Man Cave. This is Pat King, your host, and I've got with me a special guest, another Cradle Catholic revert story of faith journey back to the church, as well as mine, as well as most of them I interview. I try to get that reversion story back out there for other men to understand that you're not alone in the same walk that we're all going through, and we all challenge. I think that's part of the church, is that we're seeking truth, and we seek it elsewhere, or we just leave it because we don't believe it's the truth. But we always tend to find our way back, and though this is a great journey. I've got with me Luke Cesnick. He's a brother knight in my Our Lady of the Valley Parish in Council 3086 in Caldwell, Idaho. And he's only been here a year and a half, and he'll tell us how he ended up here, since he's from Minnesota. And did I say that right? Is that the right? Minnesota? Minnesota. Yeah, okay. So anyway, Luke here is a brother knight, and I've gotten to know him. I don't really know him all that well. He's gone a lot. He just disappears, and we don't know where he's at. And he's not at Knights meeting sometimes.
He's floating around somewhere.
He's floating around somewhere. There's a point to that. We'll get to that later. But yeah, he floats around a lot. He's full of hot air. But anyway, so he came to Caldwell about a year and a half ago, and immediately became transferred into the Knights. And because he's gone a lot, it was hard to get to really know him. But he's really been helpful out of the fish fries during this last Lent, and when you have time before the crowd comes and stuff, we get to talking, and found out he has a heck of a story, not just what he does as a volunteer, but his life story as it is. So, Luke, I'm going to have you just start where you're born. I know you're born one day, but can you believe he's 71 years old? Good heavens. I swear when he told me he was 71, I said, no way you're 71 years old. I know 71-year-olds, and they don't look like you. So, Luke, tell me about where you're from.
Well, I am born and raised in St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right.
I love
that. And, I started off in a good Catholic family. My mom and dad were both.
Is there a bad Catholic family?
Well, I don't know. I suppose there could be.
There could be.
Excuse me. So my dad was a doctor, a practicing doctor, family practitioner in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and my mother was a nurse. They actually met when she was in nursing school, and he was going to St. John's University out at Collegeville.
Now that's a Catholic.
That's a Catholic university.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah. And it's a beautiful place to go visit. But it's one of those things where, I didn't have a lot of choice. I was baptized as a Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I went to St. Peter's, and then I think I was at St. Peter's all the way up until sixth grade. And so we had nuns that wore the habits and stuff like that. And
how many children in your family?
There's 9 other brothers and sisters, so there's 10 of us.
9.
Yeah.
Now, where do you fall in line?
I'm number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah.
So you're not quite in the middle, but very close. I'm the middle child.
That's right. Yeah. So my mom and dad were kind of accused of practicing the rhythm method for birth control. Okay, and here's the rhythm.
You were in the wrong rhythm.
No. Here's the rhythm. They had a boy and 2 girls, a boy and 2 girls, a boy and 2 girls, and a boy. There's the good rhythm, huh?
That's funny.
And they were, like I said, they were a good Catholic family, and Mom and Dad went to church all the time, and we made sure to go along with them, or they made sure to take us.
No,
with them.
It wasn't a choice. Yeah. You were in tow regardless.
Exactly. But I remember the days of being at St. Peter's Church.
So,
you know, and
10 kids.
10 kids, yeah.
Do you? I mean, what nationality are you? What heritage?
I'm half German, quarter Dutch, and quarter Yugoslavian.
Okay, so you're a mixed breed like I am.
Yes,
So
yeah.
did your parents have that? Did they corner you one parent on each end, or did they just have that look where if you were took us on the pew, they just looked at you and you stood back up?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no sitting on the pew.
No,
You're supposed to be kneeling. Yeah.
No, and my mom raised us. She was a single parent at that time, but I tell you what, if your behind was sitting on the pew behind you, all she did was look at you.
No, that's right.
And you just came to attention post haste.
Yeah, that's right. Or just a little.
But were you cornered by both parents? I mean, one on each end.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it was.
That's the only way to keep the kids in line.
Well,
they can only reach so far.
That's right. Yeah. Well, a lot of times it was my mom in the middle, and then kids on both sides, and Dad was off at the hospital or something like that.
Oh, because he was a doctor. That's true.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, he'd get a call at 4:00 in the morning, and he'd be gone until noon or something like that. And but it was a very interesting upbringing. My brothers and sisters and I all went to church together, and it just seems like everything was going along real well until we all started leaving home and we all started drifting away from the Catholic Church.
That never happened. I've never heard that before.
Well, I went in the military, and there were a few times that, like when I was over in Southeast Asia and stuff like that, where I would go to Mass on base. And of course, then they had a chaplain, a base chaplain. A lot of times they were Catholic priests, but they had a chapel, and then they would either have Catholic Mass in there, or they'd have other chaplains coming in, and they would be doing Baptists or whatever, But then it was one of those things where I just kind of drifted away. I just didn't go that often, and then it's just kind of like after I got out of the military, basically, I never went back. It was one of those things where it was just, I was out looking, I went to a couple of different churches and they didn't excite me at all. But I always kept in the back of my mind that Mass was a lot more sacred than what anybody else put out there.
So you mentioned in our pre-show warm-up, that your father had issues with the university he was going to. Was that before getting married and the kids, or was that
that was more after where St. John's University got to be very, very liberal and you didn't pray to God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. It was God the woman. It's just like it was ridiculous.
What time area would this be?
That would have been back in the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
So were you at home at that time?
No, I wasn't. But when I would come home, I'd get an earful because he wasn't real happy with the way the Catholic Church was being run at the college.
Yeah.
But the parishes were okay. He made very good friends with the priests that were running the parishes that we were in, and when he moved from St. Cloud to Clear Lake, he became very good friends with the priest there, and then also the priest in Big Lake, which was just up the road, was a priest that he was actually a dorm mate with him at St. John's University before he became a priest. So, but funny story, the two of them were out one day in the fall. They were going to St. John's University, and they went out pheasant hunting, and they got a couple of pheasants, and they brought them back and cleaned them up and stuff like that. But they brought the shotguns back to their dorm room. And my dad accidentally fired off a shot in the dorm room. Blew a hole in the wall.
He forgot it was loaded, huh?
He forgot it was loaded, and it was pretty embarrassing for him. But it was one of those things where he got slapped on the hand a little bit. They took his gun away from him for a week during hunting season.
Oh,
it was painful.
Well, that's the penance you pay for blowing a hole in your dorm room.
but a week later they got their guns back and they were able to go back out hunting. But that's kind of the way we were growing up and stuff. I remember going to high school, and in the trunk of the car I had duck decoys and my shotgun and ammunition and all sorts of other stuff, and we had it right there on the the property, the high school property and stuff, and there was nothing ever said about that.
Yeah, when I was growing up in Twin Falls, I didn't have a car at the time. I didn't get a car for a while, and so my friends and I would be going to school, but then we'd plan on let's go hunting. Let's go pheasant hunting or along the banks because we lived near the high school was near farmland, but our walk home was through a lot more farmland, and so we knew most of the farmers, so we had permission to hunt the ground, and so I'm walking. I lived 2-3 blocks from the school, so I'd walk with my shotgun over my shoulder and shells in my backpack, I didn't have a backpack per se, but I had a bag to carry my shells in, and I'd be walking down the street with my gun over my shoulder, walking through all these public roads and through the parking lot of the the Safeway and all that, and onto the school grounds and carrying it in the hallway. Didn't think anything of it, and I'd get the comment from a teacher saying, "Well, you know what to do with that, Mr. King." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to put it in my locker." No, it's no shells are in it. It's empty. And I put it in my locker, and we had a gun club and all that. And every truck in the parking lot had I thought that was standard issue when I moved from California to Idaho, that every truck had a gun rack with guns in it.
In the back window.
And I thought that was how you bought a truck. Standard issue was a gun rack and guns. And and everybody had them in the parking lot because most of us after school, we'd go hunting.
Yeah. And we went duck hunting early in the morning.
Yeah.
And then we went to school.
Well,
and then we'd go in the evening.
Some of us did that. We'd do it after practice. It was getting twilight. We thought, let's get in a few, shots and have fun. And no one was worried about it, and so that was just, it's so bizarre that we have all this fear now, and rightly so in some cases, but I think it's just handled poorly.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think about this story about my dad, blowing a hole in the dorm room wall with a shotgun and stuff like that. But then I have to kind of chuckle because I was over in Thailand during the Vietnam War in the Air Force, and I was in charge of the armory, and of course we had all the nicest guns and stuff like that, and everything else went out to everybody else, right?
And free bullets.
And free bullets, yeah, exactly. So I remember a .38 revolver that I was playing around with, and I had 2 of them, and I was trying to figure out which one I really liked the best, and we were holstering it and pulling it out and just dry firing it and stuff like that, and I had one gun that was loaded and one gun that was empty, and I grabbed the wrong gun, and I actually fired and knocked a hole in the wall, and there was somebody at a desk that was kind of sitting like where you are, and I shot over the top of his head, and he just kind of sat back in his chair and went, "Am I okay?"
Like father, like son.
My God, yes. Messing around with guns.
Now you told your dad that story, I suppose.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So
before he passed away. Yeah. So
what did he say about that? He goes, "Come on, you're not supposed to follow me in everything I do."
He just laughed and said, "Yep."
So do you have any other family stories like that?
Oh gosh,
those are always fun.
Yeah, those are always fun. No, the big thing is growing up in a large family. I was somewhere in the middle, and had an older brother that I was always looking up to, and then I had 3 younger brothers that were under me. So it was like actually 2 of them, David and Blaine, and so it was like I'd look up to him, and I'd want to go do things with him and stuff like that. And of course, he didn't want to have his younger brother around and that kind of stuff. And so then I went off and did my own thing and stuff. And all of a sudden, I got younger brothers that are trying to hang out with me, and it's just one of those things where after a while, you got to the point where your brothers were really your best friend and stuff like that. So it was. one of those things where we'd go to church together, and my mom would always make sure that the boys were separated, and of course there was girls in between us. So because we'd get in trouble, we'd start horsing around in church or something like that, and of course you'd hear this little, like that kind of stuff, in church.
Or that look.
Look, yes, yeah.
Yeah, you were not allowed to cause a scene.
That's right.
So, did you guys play? Do you guys sports active?
Oh yeah. We had ball games playing all the time, and of course that's when I grew up in an age where you got up in the morning, especially in the summertime. You got up in the morning, you got your clothes on and did whatever, right? Had a little breakfast, and then your mom would tell us, make sure you're home for supper.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So when the street lights come on, you better be home, kind of thing, And it was just one of those things where you just you got to hook up with friends and spend the whole day just messing around. So we played a lot of ball games and rode bikes everywhere, and we travel all
without
around.
Helmets.
Without helmets.
Without helmets. And look at that, you're still here.
I am, yeah.
I grew up with that same thing. Even with a single mom, she still had that faith and trust in her kids that. Well, she looked at
the community.
Yeah, in the community. Well, she looked at it this way: if you're hungry, you're going to come home.
Yeah.
I'm not holding anything for you, so dinner's at this time. You're hungry, you be there.
Yeah.
Or you don't get to eat.
That's right.
And then my mom did the one thing she did hate was daylight savings time because in Idaho. We're still light at about 11 o'clock at night in the peak of the summer.
Yeah.
And her rule was, you have to be home by dark.
Yeah.
And
when the street lights came on.
we kind of like lights are on, but it's still light out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We always push that envelope, But I remember once growing up, mom allowed this weeknight baseball game. It was a Angels game. I think Minnesota Twins were playing. I don't remember the opposing team, but it was one of the longest extra inning games on record. It went 21 innings.
Yeah.
And, so I'm watching the game. It's a weeknight, a school day. And my mom goes, she goes, okay, it's time for bed. I said, well, the game's not over. It was a good game. I think it was a 1-0 game or a 0-0 game. And she goes, okay, you can stay up till the game's over. And boy, she never said that again. But so the 9th inning comes, and 10th and 11th, 12th, and it's inning 20. It's getting into midnight into the next day. And mom goes, "Why aren't you in bed?" I said, "But the game's not over. You said I could stay up till the game was over, and it wasn't over." And so I think it ended at like 12:04 in the morning.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And the Angels won, and she goes, "I'm never going to say that again." But I got to say it because she was honorable and a person of her word when she said I could stay up. But that was the life, that parents had rules and they stuck with their rules as well as the ones they expected you to follow. But I don't think kids are allowed to be that anymore, which is sad. That's not the message I want to get on right now, but that's sad because I grew up with a respect for my parents and they let us be free. We'd go off on our bikes and be gone. We'd go 10, 15 miles away from the house, but she knew we were with our friends and where we were at and no cell phones back then, no email.
No.
But the thing is, she was an emergency room nurse, and she knew all the police officers. So if she's going to hear anything, she's going to get it from the cops. And if she does, and she knows I'm either dead or okay.
Yeah.
Not in the hospital, though.
Well, to go back, I wanted to finish that story about, excuse me. After I went in the service, I got out of high school. And we always went to, CCD, so we had catechism every Wednesday night. And when we got out of high school, I went in the service. And that's where I just kind of drifted away from the Catholic Church and stuff. And it was quite a few years before.
Were you drafted or did you volunteer?
No, I volunteered. Well, I was voluntold.
Okay. By your parents or?
By my parents, yes. Yeah. something about this bag of weed that they found. And my dad said, "Hey, I'm tired of your shenanigans and stuff like that. You're either going to go to jail or you're going to go in the service. You choose."
I think my mom was that strong too. Yes.
And so I chose the Air Force and went into the Air Force. I never held that against my dad because it was kind of my mistake. It wasn't his. He was just trying to make sure that I was going to be a good kid and turned out well, and that, he did the best he could. And I was trying to do the worst I could.
Did you ever hear the thing, "I've got 9 others"?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, my dad used to say it's cheaper by the dozen, and the older ones could take care of the younger ones.
Well, my dad said he was trying for a baseball team. So not for a baseball team. So you got voluntold. You entered in. Did you go to the Air Force Academy, or how did you get into the?
No, I was just a regular enlisted person.
So did you go to college before that? Well, you were in college at this time, or did you go to college? Or
I didn't go to college. So
neither
but
did I.
The one thing that I did do, my dad and I should back up here a little bit. When I was about 5 years old, I remember going for an airplane ride with my uncle and my dad, and my uncle was the chief instructor out at the airport, and that kind of stuck with me, flying, And when I was 13, I was talking to the guy that ran the airport, and he said, I need somebody this summer to help, fuel airplanes and help us out here and that kind of stuff. So at 13, I was riding my bike to the airport, which was about a mile away. And the coolest thing about it is that I got to drive the fuel truck.
At 13?
At 13.
On an airport?
On an airport,
oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And so
Nothing to hit there.
No. Well, I was very cognizant of all of that. So, but I did a lot of refueling. I washed a lot of airplanes. I did anything I could at the airport, and I was getting, paid to do it. And it was just really, really cool.
Awesome.
Well, at 15 and a half, I decided that I'd start my flying lessons. So I paid for my own flying lessons. I had worked, part-time and stuff as I was going through school. And so my uncle lined me up with one of the instructors out there, and I started to learn how to fly. So at 15 and a half, I started flying lessons. At 16, I wanted to do the solo, and I wanted to get my driver's license, So when I turned 16, that day I went and took my driver's test, but the weather was bad, so I couldn't go flying, And so it was like 3 or 4 days later that I finally was able to do my first solo. And then, I kept flying and that kind of stuff, but I wasn't really chasing after the next license, because at 16 you can solo it, but at 17 you can get your private pilot's license.
Wow.
So I kept into aviation, stuff like that. And at 17, I really didn't have enough money to keep going for the private. At 18, I got thrown out of school because I was skipping too much.
High school?
High school.
Oh.
And it was my senior year.
Geez, we do have a lot in common.
And my dad was up in Canada, and he was up fishing, and I decided not to go on this trip with him and stuff. But we had a party at the house, and my sister was in charge, my oldest sister, and she came down into the one of the basement bedrooms down there and smelled this strange pot
odor
smell and stuff like that, and she caught me with this, and she called up my dad, and my dad called up his attorney and said, "Look," he says, "I want you to go over because I'm not coming back from my fishing trip just for this baloney, And so I met with his attorney, and his attorney said, "Look, your dad says you're either going in the service or you're going to jail. What do you want to do?"
So he sent an emissary to tell you.
He did. And it wasn't much longer that he came home, and we didn't talk very much after that. But I was mad at him, and he was mad at me, and I was being rebellious and everything else.
So this would have been what, early '60s or mid '60s?
Well, it would have been late '60s.
Oh, late '60s. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because in 1970. February of '70 is when I went in the Air Force.
Right. So late '60s.
Yeah.
So the reason why I bring up the pot was because that you grew up as a hippie era.
I did in the
that
60s.
hippie era.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the rebellious era.
I'm surprised I didn't end up in jail.
Oh.
I mean, I did some crazy stuff.
Well, your dad did the right thing by you then.
He did.
Yes.
He really did. Yeah, yeah. And I didn't hold that against him or anything like that.
Well, good.
'Cause after I went in the service and made it through and stuff like that, it's kind of like I thought back to my dad and we talked and stuff like that and I told him, I said, if I was to do this all over again, I probably wouldn't have done what I did before you forced me into the service, but I would still go back in the service.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, you live and you learn and you embrace life and you try to, try to make the best out of where you're at. Right.
How long did you serve?
3 years, 10 months, and 3 days.
Okay, not that he's counting.
Not that I was counting. Actually, I got an early out to go to college. But back up a little bit. So I'd been thrown out of high school, and so when my class was graduating from high school, I was already out of boot camp and on to.
Were you 17 or had you turned 18?
I had turned 18.
All right.
Yeah. So I had turned 18 in December, and I was supposed to graduate, in May or June, right, of that next year. Well, I went in the service in February, and it was one of those things where I struggled going through boot camp and stuff like that, and I was homesick as heck.
Because it was discipline or
discipline
and the homesick.
Oh yeah, and I was very rebellious. I was rebelling against authority and stuff like that, And,
so what's your birth date?
It was December 18th.
I'm the 21st of December.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brother, I got a brother at the 19th.
And I was born in 51.
Yeah, I was born in 61.
61. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, then you're as old as my youngest brother. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. My youngest brother was born in January of 60.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, to go back to this is, so here I am in the Air Force, and I'm joining, and I said, but I know how to fly, And they said, well, sorry, you don't have 4 years of college. We're not going to let you fly the airplanes.
Oh, wow.
We're going to let you guard the airplanes. So I was considered.
So your flying experience didn't weigh anything.
Not at all. Because I didn't have 4 years of college. The Air Force, required 4 years of college for you to be able to do any flying. So I thought about, maybe going to school while I was in the service and stuff like that, and then maybe making a career out of it and stuff. But that was a fleeting thought.
So you never got to fly.
So I got to be a rivet counter. I got to march around and guard the airplanes and stuff like that. And actually, I became a security police dog handler. So I had patrol dogs and stuff like that. And when I went into the Air Force, that was down at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. You got 6 weeks of basic training, and then you had 6 weeks of technical school that you usually went to,
right.
And then you went on to serve at other bases and stuff. So I went through security police school, and then I went through the dog school, and then I was based at Lackland. So I was at the induction center for where the dogs were inducted into the military for all 4 services.
Okay.
So we had up to 350 dogs in our our kennel area.
What was the primary dog used? German Shepherd?
German Shepherd,
German Shepherd.
Yeah, or a mix thereof. And we had a vet clinic on the base, and I think there was they say 6 or 8 veterinarians that worked at that clinic.
Wow.
Because we were tasked with going to the airport and picking up these huge metal crates with dogs in it that were, people were donating or the military would end up with. And then we would bring them in, and then we would test them. So we would see how aggressive they were or, whatever. And then they would go into dog school. And the dogs actually went through school maybe 4 or 5 times, until they got it right, I guess. And then they had a tattoo in their ear and stuff like that. And then they were military patrol dogs or security dogs or sentry dogs. And so as I was in the service, I was drifting away from the Catholic religion. And, it was one of those things where when I got over in Southeast Asia, I started thinking I need to, talk to God a little bit and let him know that I'm still here and that I'm I I want to be saved, and I hope nothing happens to me while I'm in Southeast Asia, right? And so
Now you weren't married at this time, right?
I was not married.
Okay.
No. This gets into a whole nother story when you get into kids and marriage and everything else, right? But so anyway, it wasn't until I did get married in 1987, and no, 89. Excuse me, 89.
Same year I got married.
87. No, 87. Yeah. Yeah. No, 87 because
he's remembering Pam. Don't worry.
Yeah. 87. But it wasn't until we started looking at different churches and that kind of stuff, because my wife wanted us to raise the kids with some religion in their background and stuff like that, and so we went to different churches that she went to, and other churches. She wasn't Catholic? No, she wasn't Catholic. Okay. And we went back to the Catholic Church, and I said, I really feel more comfortable about going back to the Catholic Church, because to me, it's like all the other churches were, it was like they had a stage and they were putting on a show.
Production.
A production, yeah, exactly. And there was nothing consistent about the production every year.
And you couldn't go to
every week.
You couldn't travel around and just go to a similar church and get the same.
All different. It depended on the pastor and all this other
absolutely.
stuff, and to me, it's just kind of like the people that were running the pastors of these things were not like priests.
No.
They didn't.
Oh no, they're definitely.
They didn't go through any formal training. Some of them, at all. Some of them went to some seminary somewhere, but it was just kind of like. There was nothing consistent about what they were doing. They just kind of made it up as they went. Yeah. And
I know I found that to be.
So when I went back to the Catholic Church, I was just like, it was a rock. It was just like you could consistently go to a Catholic church anywhere.
Yeah.
And you could always go to the Mass and celebrate the Mass and the Eucharist and the body and blood of Christ, and it felt very, very authentic compared to these other places. In fact, when we talk about doing some of this stuff, I remember when we were up in the Northeast, we wanted to go to a Sunday Mass, and we were doing an event up there, and so we looked it up, and we went to this church, and I'll be darned, we got in there and we didn't understand what language it was. It was a whole Mass in French.
I've been to several foreign country masses, exactly. Portugal. I've been
but you could follow along. It was the same Mass.
Yeah.
They prayed the same prayers, but they were in a different language.
Right.
So we were able to follow along in the missalettes and stuff like that, and pray the prayers in English.
And the only thing you really didn't get was whatever the homily was.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And by that time, you still got the greater part of the Mass in you. Mm-hmm. So got the readings, got the the season, what they're going to be doing. So it's very welcoming. So. When you got married, did you marry after you got out of the military, or just?
Well, I had got out of the military in 1973.
Okay.
Late 73, and then I did get my GED while I was in the Air Force, and then I went to 2 years of like a technical college. And it was all about computers and that kind of stuff, and I got out of the service when I was based in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and so I went to Laramie County Community College.
Okay.
And after 2 years, I proved to myself and my parents that, hey, I did have a brain. I was able to come out of there with a B+ average, and I never did finish up and get an associate's degree, which I should have probably done. But, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Yeah. I moved on, right? And so at the time I was living with this gal, and that was going nowhere. And so when I moved to Oregon, I ran into I was working at a computer place, and my future wife came in to do an interview as a secretary or receptionist or whatever, and it was funny because she said that when she saw me, she knew that was the guy she was going to marry.
Wow.
And I'm going, well, I wish I would have thought the same thing, but I was just chasing girls,
So what took you from Wyoming to Oregon?
My girlfriend at the
Oh,
time.
the one you were living with.
Yeah, the one I was living with.
Oh.
It didn't work out so well. And when we moved to Oregon, it was kind of like, okay, she wanted to move out there because she thought it was pretty cool and stuff like that. I was in Cheyenne, and I had got out of the service, and I was using the GI Bill, and I got my commercial, my instrument, my multi-engine, and my flight instructor's rating. And I thought about having a career as a flight instructor and teaching people how to fly. But it didn't take me long to find out you could starve as a flight instructor, especially in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I didn't have a lot of prospects for students there and stuff like that. So I actually drove for UPS for 8 years out of there.
Wow.
And then my girlfriend wanted to move, and I thought, oh, geez, I'm 2 years away from being vested in their retirement at UPS and stuff like that. And she convinced me that we should move to Oregon. So we moved to Oregon. I quit UPS. They had a no hire or no transfer policy, so I ended up going out there, and so I kind of bit the bullet and went, right, and I helped to run an air freight company out there and stuff like that, and I tried to get her to go to a couple of Catholic masses with me, and she just fought it all away. So being wild and crazy, I just said, okay, well, I won't go to mass then either, right? But it didn't take long.
Way to stand your ground.
Yeah, it didn't take
like
long.
Me.
And we broke up, and I had started dating Pam, who I'm married to currently, and we worked together for a year before we started dating, and then she had a little boy already, 3-year-old boy, and his name is Devin, and so. She was saying, look, I want to raise him properly. I don't want you coming into our lives and then leaving, that kind of stuff, and Devin and I hit it off great. And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. I'm settling down, and, I'm thinking I should.
Now, how old are you at this point?
Oh gosh, let's see. I was 25, 20. No, I was 30. Oh gosh, I was 35.
Okay.
I was 35.
Wow.
At that point. Yeah.
You're married late in life.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I remember I was 35 is because she took me to a saddle club that she belonged to, and this was up in oh gosh, it was a small little town just north of Eugene, Oregon, and. Anyway, she went to the saddle club meeting, and everybody knew that she had been dating somebody. She finally took me along to one of her meetings and stuff, and she introduced me as her 35-year-old.
And how old was she at the time?
Well, she was 8 years younger, so yeah. So she was in her 20s.
35.
Yeah. So anyway, we came to kind of a meeting of the minds that I was serious about her, and she was serious about me, and so in 1987, we got married. In fact, I proposed to her, and I said, I want you to marry me and stuff, and would you be so gracious to do that, And she says, okay, fine. She says, when? I said, and I kind of hesitated and looked up in the air, and I'm going, oh God, come on, help me out here. How about February 14th? Oh, yeah. She says, that's a great idea. She says, yeah.
No one's ever thought of that.
Well, that way I'll never forget it, right? And then she says, okay, where? And I'm going, let me think about that for a little bit. And I came back and I said, how about Hawaii?
Now, how far out is this from you asked her to, how many months before you actually got married was this time span?
Oh, it's probably maybe 5-6 months. Yeah.
Okay, so you had a little bit of time to plan.
Yeah, a little bit of time to plan. Yeah.
And you wanted to get married in Hawaii.
Yeah. So, and she said, okay, sounds great. So we flew over to Hawaii. She had never met my parents yet,
And where were they at the time?
In Minnesota. And I'm out in Oregon. So my dad had to do some continuing medical education. Every year they had to have so many hours of what do they call it? The CME or something like that, right. Continuing medical education. And so he said, well, they've got this class that I want to go to, and it's over in Hawaii and stuff like that. And he found that out, and he found out the dates and stuff like that. And so he and my mom had gone over, And so we were flying into Honolulu, and she's only seen pictures of them, that kind of stuff, and I said, well, do you see my parents around anywhere? She said, no, I don't see them. And I said, well, there they are right there, And she says, oh my God, she says, they look like my grandparents, because she was so much younger, 8 years younger than me, right? So anyway, we saw them in Honolulu, and then we jumped on an airplane, and then we flew to Kauai, the Garden Island.
Right.
And I always told my wife, I said, let's go get married where Elvis got married, in the tropical gardens of Kauai. And so that's what we had planned on. And so the next day, my parents took a flight, and they met us over there. We got married, and it was by a minister, and my dad was not real happy about that, and he really wanted to see his kids, active in the Catholic Church and stuff. And anyway, we went through this whole thing, and it was funny because, we just got done with the ceremony, and we were walking back to the car, and there's this bus, this tour bus that blocked us in. We couldn't get out. So what do, right? In my white tux, I get in there and I hotwire the bus. And I back the bus up. We get the car out of there, and I put the bus back where it was. And my dad was just shaking his head and stuff. And so we had a great time. And then we flew over to the Big Island for the honeymoon and stuff like that. So her dad and my dad and mom were there, and we went through the honeymoon, and we did different things. We went snorkeling and scuba diving and fishing and that kind of stuff. And anyway, we came back to the lower 48 or the contiguous 48, right? We came back to Oregon, and so that was February 14th when we got married. August 14th of '87 is when I adopted her son Devin. So she was a single mother, out of wedlock. She didn't get married to the guy, and so I adopted.
How old was Devin at this point?
About 3.
No. Oh, at the point of the adoption?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was about 3 years old, and then we had my wife got pregnant, so it was a honeymoon baby, and so that's when our daughter Anastasia was born in October 1st of '87.
Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Man Cave, a weekly podcast discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. A production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. To learn more about our ministry, please visit our website, saltandlightradio.com.